Kakampi sila, magpapakitang gilas sa ginuhit na linya. Huwag palampasin ang kahit na isa.
Good morning, everyone. I am Dr. Marisa Resulta, Socials Committee Chair of Ako Para sa Bata 2020. The 12th Ako Para sa Bata is presented by the Child Protection Network Foundation and UNICEF. Our theme this year is Care of the Child Against Violence in the Time of the Disease. If you are not following us, please do follow the Ako Para sa Bata social media accounts. Tag or mention Ako Para sa Bata and make sure to include the hashtag COVID APSB 2020 in your posts. Again, it's hashtag COVID APSB 2020. So let's officially begin. So let me introduce you to the moderator of the session entitled Healthy Internet Use in the Time of Pandemic. So she is a developmental and behavioral pediatrician of the Center Medical International, the Developmental Pediatrics Partners Clinic, and the Diliman Doctors Hospital. A diplomate of the Philippine Pediatric Society, our dear Ako Para sa Bata community, let us all welcome the moderator of this session, Dr. Lara Ellen Galvante Landazabal. Over to you, Dr. Lara.
Morning, everyone. Thank you, Ma'am Marisa, for that kind introduction. So welcome to the webinar 17, which is entitled Healthy Internet Use in the Time of Pandemic. To those who joined the previous Ako Para sa Bata webinars, welcome back. For the first-timers, welcome. We welcome you to the Ako Para sa Bata community. We are full capacity in our Zoom account, and we are joined by many others on Facebook Live. On behalf of the Child Protection Network Foundation and UNICEF, we are deeply grateful for your continued support. Ako, tayo, para sa bata. This is the 17th webinar of Ako Para sa Bata 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic has transformed our lives by indiscriminately imposing on us what is now known as the new normal. For many of our children, this stay-at-home setup may mean entertaining themselves through online games, seeing friends through their social media, or by watching TV shows until dawn. These, on top of schooling in virtual classrooms, may make internet and gadgets indispensable to our children. As parents or guardians, we may not fully comprehend how excessive screen time can affect our children's overall health. Even if we do know of its perils, sometimes our ability to control our children's screen time falters. As we continually adjust our own rules and routines at home, we need to be guided on how to implement effective strategies so our children can reap the benefits of being online without compromising their overall well-being. So in this session, we aim to describe the threats of recreational screen use to the child's physical, developmental, and psychosocial well-being, to discuss recommendations of experts on appropriate screen use for children, and to identify strategies where parents and caregivers can ensure healthy internet or media use by children. Our first speaker is a professor at the Ateneo de Manila University and a columnist in the Philippine Daily Inquirer, all in the family. She has several awards such as the 10 Outstanding Young Men, 10 Outstanding Women in the Nation's Service, Metrobank Foundation's Outstanding Teachers, DOST's Great Men and Women of Science, Outstanding Young Scientist, National Book Awards, Carlos Palanca Awards, and the Catholic Mass Media Awards. To discuss parenting, hashtag in the time of Corona, the how-to of raising wired children in the time of pandemic, let us all give a warm welcome to Dr. Quina Lee Chua.
Thank you, Dr. Lara. It's a pleasure for me to be here today. I've given so many webinars on parenting in the time of pandemic, and many of the questions the parents ask, I'm going to share with you today. So let's just go straight to the presentation. The first one is many parents are saying that their kids need to be online for learning purposes in the pandemic. So what can they do if many pediatricians, including what you will hear from Dr. Toyang later on, including also the Pediatric Society of the US, many of them, even years ago before the pandemic, said that screen time has to be minimized for students. So before I answer that, let me just go through what is most essential for learning. Okay? So it's not so much whether you're online or offline. I really want to stress that. Many of us think that the pandemic is responsible for the rush of online misbehavior now, but that is not true. I've been giving talks to doctors, including the Philippine Pedia Society, since 2013 on the dangers of too much indiscriminate use. So the pandemic can be blamed for many things, but not exactly for our bad habits when it comes to internet use. So again, for learning, structure is essential. Willpower, we say, willpower meaning you can tell your child to stop after 1 hour. It may work, but real learning requires deliberate practice and structure. And the scary thing right now, that's why so many people are worried about online learning, is there's no more external structure. External structure would be the students would go to school before, and the parents would go to work, and the parents did not need, the parents don't even have to think about children's learning until the kids come home. For those in private schools, if you're listening here, many kids sadly even have tutors, so the parents really don't have much say in their learning. Right now, many parents are in a panic. That is the word. Okay? Some parents have cried, and actually in the webinars during Q&As, because they say they don't know what to do now. And they don't know what to do now because for the first time in history, their children are also with them in the house. And there's no structure in the house for genuine learning. So that is the more important thing. The lack of structure, because kids basically are left to do their own devices, literally and metaphorically. And many children, many Filipino children have not developed the intrinsic habits to learn on their own. So these are exact questions parents ask during other seminars. The child on screen the whole day, rubbing their eyes. Of course, rubbing their eyes. Many of my college students tell me they have developed dry eyes. Of course, they develop dry eyes. They're on screen all the time. They seldom blink. Um, they also say many, and the ones in red are the most numerous questions. So the real thing would be, yes, you need learning. You need to be online for live classes sometimes. Those schools that are fortunate to have live classes. But many times the parents say they know that their kids are actually not really listening to the teacher, and they're actually doing YouTube and Facebook. How do we keep our children away? So these are the real questions. I tell the parents they cannot do much. Okay, we can actually limit. I'm very happy with when I saw the results of your poll, that many of you parents say that you actually allow them only an hour, which I think is already too much, but that's not too bad. Some people allow 2 to 3. There's no choice in the poll a while ago for 3 or more. I suspect that many parents actually allow their 2-year-olds to be online for more than 3 hours. The survey we did in 2013, the students are online more than 10 hours a day with more than 10 windows open at any one time. So if it's not, for the young kids, the parents can have a say. For the older kids, what is needed would be self-regulation. So we structure, again, this is structure the home environment to make motivation a habit. So to answer some of the questions given here, for instance, our house is not big enough for separate rooms. They get distracted as they study together. I would actually tell them, use earphones. Many earphones are not expensive. So some of my students say the earphones cost less than 1,000 pesos. And you can have 3 or 4 kids with earphones studying in the same room. If that is the only room that has a Wi-Fi signal that is, in a sense, strong enough for live classes. So earphones are very important. And there should be, many parents ask about exercise. Okay, so this parent who actually says our child is on screen, how do we encourage her to exercise? I tell her you cannot wait for the child to want to exercise. You have to schedule exercise in the middle of the day. And this is one misnomer. Many parents say that their kids are on screen 24/7. And I'm going to tell you this. I've given talks to more than 70 schools since May. No school, whether public or private, whether in Luzon, Visayas, or Mindanao, no school I know says that they do online classes from 7:30 to 4:30. None. Most schools do online classes in the morning. Okay, so 7:30 to 12, and hindi siya tuloy-tuloy. So it's online classes for maybe for the enlightened, when I say enlightened schools, these are schools that know the developmental stages. So for many of these schools, each subject meets only, if they're kinder to grade 1, I'm thinking of K-12, so kinder, grade 1, grade 2, the primary grades, they meet only 20 minutes per subject. Then there is a break. Then they go back for another 20 to even 30 minutes if they have to for subjects like math. So it is not true, parents. If your children tell you that they have classes the entire day from 7:30 to 4:30, that's actually not true. So ngayon, hindi talaga, lalo na when I give talks to public schools. Some public schools actually can go live. Not very often, but they can go live. The others are depending on what we call learning packets. So their barangays give them USB materials, or some DepEd, the more proactive DepEd agencies, and I congratulate them for that, would actually send them printed copies. And then they chat with their teachers online. So, but hindi yung online, yung sinasabi kasi ng mga bata, kailangan nilang online kasi raw kailangan nilang mag-attend ng klase. Yes, that is true for a few hours, but that is not true for 7 days a week and more than 10 hours a day. So what does that mean then? That most of the distractions that are happening are not because of the pandemic. Most of them already happening before that. It's just that these kids, because their parents maybe don't know what they're really doing, these kids are used to, or possibly some are already, I hate to really use the term, but some might already be addicted to social media or gaming. So we can blame the pandemic for many things, but not for very, very bad habits for internet. For exercise, I told the parents, don't wait for the child to want to exercise. Schedule it every day. Physical exercise is so important now because you have to counter the effects of the screen. You have to actually look out, physical exercise. Go out for a walk in the barangay. That is the easiest physical exercise. The quarantine controls are lifted now, whether for good or ill. Okay, it's walking, sunshine, fresh air. Those are so important. And then I've talked about this in many books. So again, distractions. Parents say, how can we avoid distractions? We can't avoid distractions, okay? We have to learn to manage distractions. So aside from the headphones, these are the biggest distractions. Surfing, doing things which are not for education, gaming. Some of my students, I don't know if this will work for you. Some of them say that they cannot help it. So some of my students, well, this is Ateneo. So some of you maybe in the private schools, if you have students who really cannot stop themselves from checking notifications every time it rings, that's one thing. I tell my students, turn off all notifications. You don't need to have a ping every few seconds, which actually interferes with your train of thought. So they actually lock themselves out of their devices. So people who are fortunate enough to have Apple, there's screen time, which can actually lock you out of your own gadget. And then for people for Android, there are other, we call them productivity apps. Many of my students say, when I talk to parents, and there are more than 1,000 parents listening now, they say, please also be role models of gadget use. My students complain that their mothers, usually it's the mothers, they say, the fathers are not strict. They say the mothers usually are the stricter. The mothers don't want them to be online all the time. And I tell them that is correct. But they also say that their mothers are posting all the time on Viber. So parents also, if we want our children to do well in internet, to use it wisely, we should also do the same. And again, I did several books on more than 100 plus real life strategies on how you can. And this is not just my book, this would be interviews from 4,000 people on how they use the internet well. I just feel I have to say this. Even when I do live classes all the time, in fact, I'm sorry I cannot stay longer today because I have to see my students after this. But even if I do live classes, I reserve my live classes for certain things, which I'll go through in a bit. Even if I would post online essays for students to read, problem sets in mathematics, but I always tell my students, even if I post it online, download it and print it out. I say, do not stay online all the time while you're doing the math problem set. That's not how our brains have evolved to do things. So technology has advanced exponentially, but evolutionarily, we are still the same Homo sapiens. We're not yet Homo computeris. So the scary thing is many kids say that they have to immerse online. Sumasakit yung mata, dry eyes, sumasakit yung ulo, and all the other pains that Dr. Toyan will tell you about, including very scary things like links possibly to ADHD, etc., Asperger's, mga ganito. And yet, they stay online. But many, many times, a lot of learning, even now with the pandemic, much of the learning is still done offline. So they see me, for college, my classes are 1 hour to 1 hour and a half. But our students normally have at most 3 classes a day. And it's usually not even tuloy-tuloy. So they have 1.5 hours or 1 hour, then college na to, and then they break. So they don't have to be online all the time in a sense, but they choose to be. So I tell them right after my class, print out the assignments and then turn off the computer and do it offline. The good students follow, majority do not. Why do I say that? Scientific American in 2013 has a cover story about it. So study after study after study says that even if we read or go through the same material, suppose this is the material you have to do on screen. Okay, so eye tracking movements show that even whether we like it or not, whether we are conscious or not, our eyes do get tired if we stay on screen for a considerable amount of time. So the red spots are where our eyes focus on. So at first, we try to read left to right. This is in English, it's left to right. Then after a while, I see it even in myself, and I am extremely focused. So kung ako hindi ko kaya ng oras, matagal na oras, in front of the internet looking at it, sumasakit na talaga yung mata ko. So what happens here is we try our best to read left to right, left to right, left to right. But according to the eye trackers, we don't do that. Look at what happens. It goes down. So all the blue stuff is where our eyes don't linger. So imagine if our students are doing that. Okay, so this is called the F-shaped pattern. Okay, so talagang you missed out a lot. I tell my students, if I give you a reading, you have to print it out. Ito na, balance. For simple tasks, very brief content, a couple of paragraphs, yes, you can do it online. Formative exercises, in Ateneo, we call it 2 to 3 very easy exercises, do it online. Substantial content, a chapter that's 10 pages, a problem set that's difficult. You will have to print out to study offline and reserve online time, preserve your eyesight for live classes. Videos, we have no choice. We have to watch it online. I also give videos. And I also give online tests. My online tests are written tests and oral tests. They have to be online to do that. So yung mga ito, they have to be online. No choice tayo. We have to go online. But there are several things you don't have to do online. Like studying most of the material, studying the books. And of course, Twitter, Netflix, I tell them, please do it on the weekend. Very few people follow, but those who follow reap the benefits. I don't have much time to do this. If I had more time, I would actually read to you. These are young people, and they actually tell us strategies for how they themselves use in order to maximize internet use in the best way. So even Dr. Jackie Navarro, developmental pedia, interviewed her before. So there's this book, in case you guys want to look at it. It deals with social media, gaming addiction, etc., reading, integrating technology, etc. If you want, it's an anvil. I know that you also did a seminar on mental health. But every time I do online learning, parents always ask about mental health. So I'll just quickly do this, even if I know you already had a webinar on this one. So in the middle of the online learning, ito na yung tinatanong nila. We are so stressed out. So are our kids. What do we do? Okay. We cannot avoid stress. Again, so yung mga webinars na avoiding stress, walang kwenta yun, okay? You have to learn to manage stress. There is stress and we have to learn to manage it. And a bit of fear is normal. We don't have to label ourselves as being, generalized anxiety. Let's stop labeling ourselves, and let's have the pedia or the psychiatrist or the psychologist label it for us. So if we're a little bit fearful in the pandemic, it's normal. Of course, we're fearful. We are uncertain. Nobody knows what will happen. Nobody knows when this will end. Nobody knows if the leaders can get their act together. So it is normal to be a bit fearful. But parents, we have to calm ourselves and calm our children. And we have to avoid obsessing about things beyond our control. That is why I do not have social media. I don't have Facebook, I don't have Twitter, and I don't feel the need to do it. And I feel I'm so much better. Naawa ako sa mga taong lagi nakarely sa Facebook. Every single like, tuwa-tuwa sila. Kung di na like, naiinis sila. So why do we need that? So, let's just, we should only focus on the things that we can control. So as parents, we care for our kids. So how do we do it for our children? We brainstorm on the routine. We help the frontliners. For me, the real frontliners are the doctors and the nurses. Honing skills. And let's fact check the chain messages from Viber. 99% of what is on social media is not true. Okay? And this is not me talking. I will tell you later on about 2 documentaries on Netflix that I feel everybody should watch. They are highly disturbing. Okay, so 99% again are not true. That's why I don't even have Viber. So people will say, how do you keep in touch with news? Well, I do. News reaches me. People who really need to reach me will know how to reach me. So I don't need to be there online. I don't need to have followers. It works wonders for my mental health. I can be productive. I can do 5 webinars a day if I don't have to think about other things. And please, if your anxiety or your depression or your child's anxiety or depression is too much, what do we mean by too much? It already interferes with normal everyday functioning. Please seek the help of the doctors who are here with you today. Dr. Lara, Dr. Toyang, Dr. Trina, everybody here, the ones who are doing the Ako Para sa Bata. Okay, because sometimes also it's genetic. For depression, it's 40, can be as high as 40%. Certain chromosomes are implicated. Keep things in perspective. Many times when I read the news, people are saying that mental health is so shot. Yes, it is true. I had a team of Ateneo teachers that do mental health, and I have 60 students now that I'm taking care of, 60. But there are some students who found purpose in the pandemic, and their mental health actually, with still medication, they're still taking their medication, they're clinically depressed, they are doing so much better. So not everybody is worse. I don't like this fear mongering that happens, all the time here. So even the newspaper I write for, kasi sensational yung news na nakakatakot eh. So, positive news does not sell. But there are students who actually got better in the pandemic. I wrote about one of them with his permission, and it's in my column. And if you want to access it, it's entitled A Sense of Purpose. Just Google, type in my name, put A Sense of Purpose Inquirer, you will see it. And this is the resource I told you about. For parents, we have detailed scripts for parents, teachers, and caregivers. So many of you in social work, if you don't know what to say, nandito lahat. It's not just me, there are 5 of us. These are all my students, PhDs in clinical psychology, and they're now teaching in Ateneo. We talked about depression, self-harm, anxiety, grief, natural disasters. We did this several years ago. And then managing anxiety, I know you have already done this. I'll just quickly do this. Mindfulness, exercise, seeking nature, quality, deep sleep. Sleep is not just quantity, 7 hours at least, but also the quality. Many, many times students tell me that they sleep for 10 hours. Parang okay yan, di ba? Nakakatakot yung 10 hours. But they say it's 10 hours and they are interrupted during the night because of the notifications on their phone. So they wake up 5 to 6 times a night, and then they sleep a total of 10 hours. And they're still very groggy when they come to class. So that's also not too good. So it's for the doctors also, please don't just do the quantity, please also do the quality. I find it when I attend webinars, nobody talks about quality. Also, quality is important. And then, of course, the blue light interfering with melatonin production, many people know about that. Internet safety, this is what I think you want me to talk to us. This is from Spider-Man's Uncle Ben. With great power comes great responsibility. The scary thing with the internet is we are giving something, a tool, with great power to do good and also to do ill to people, basically our kids, who are not equipped to use it well. So, schools na muna rito. Okay, every time I talk to schools, they have to address cyberbullying, trolling, critical thinking, quality websites. .edu would be better than maybe .com, mga ganyan. Okay? But parents, you need to model safe use. So social media, FB is technically not legal for anyone below 13 years old. And yet my students tell me that their parents open FB accounts for them even when they're 3 to 4 years old. That's ridiculous and that's crazy. Why do the kids need an FB account? Seriously. Okay, so until 13 years old, several of the Silicon Valley entrepreneurs say that they actually prefer that this goes up to 16 years old because it's, you know, Facebook is being used so badly now. And we parents, please tell the kids, don't keep on, they should not keep on thinking about the number of followers, about the number of likes. Walang kwenta yon. These are not, your followers will not be able to help you in a real crisis. You need real friends. So restrict access to trusted people. Distinguish between real and online friends. Okay? So nakakatakot dito is the self-worth of many people is now tied, their identity is tied to the number of followers that they have and the affirmations that they get on social media. What does it mean? Why is it so tied to that? Perhaps because they're not getting the affirmation they need at home. Many of my students say that. They are quarreling with their parents, you know, they're nagging down, you know, even if I tell them your parents nag you because they care, ang daming gulo. Okay? Because nga, so they seek for affirmation outside. And maybe it might started out, Facebook started out as a good thing. Right now, it has morphed into a monster. Ito na, please watch this, everybody. Netflix, The Social Dilemma. This is actually worse than it scared me when I watched it last week. I talked about it with my students. Many of them say they also did not know. So basically, The Social Dilemma interviews countless Silicon Valley people, including the creators of many of the apps that we use today. And they tell us that they regretted. They did not know that the inventions they were so proud of before would be hijacked for the purposes of big media companies, even for rogue nations and rogue people in society. Okay, so just watch it. The other one that's also a bit scary, actually not a bit scary, it is very scary. The Great Hack. The most important documentary of this talks about how Cambridge Analytica hijacked the US elections in 2016. This is the irony as we speak now. I think all of you know that the American elections start today, November 3. And they actually feel that the elections possibly are also being hijacked by algorithms and by bad actors. So I'm not qualified enough to talk about this one, but this is a scary one, and it happens to be true. They also feature insiders who talk about what really happens. And these insiders come out. They're whistleblowers now, and they have testified to the British Parliament and to the US Congress. So nakakatakot itong dalawa. Every parent, every doctor, every social, I think everybody should watch these two. So I used to think it was just cyberbullying, it's just for kids. Iba na, alam mo, iba na. They're hijacking data points of all of us. Every time you go on Facebook, your data is being mined and used without your knowing it. That scares me. Okay? Even I know that we say, but you know, we only use Facebook to connect with friends. That is true. We use it for good things, but other people do not. So there's a movement now that, you know, to actually, their movement there, this is beyond the scope of this webinar, that we should be actually paid for our data. Every time you keep on clicking consent to cookies, etc., you're giving away your data. And sa Pilipinas, wala tayong medyo pakialam, di ba? Pero nangyayari na rin dito sa atin to. So, and before the pandemic, this is the problem. And this remains the problem today. Distractions, discipline, communication, learning independently are huge. Dr. Toyang will tell you more about this. In my previous talks, I would to neuro. I would talk about the dopamine, etc. Gray matter decrease, mga ganito. Glutamine is being several brain areas that are being hijacked, but Dr. Toyang will talk about it, and I want to tell you, I'm so proud of her. She was one of my best students before. I'm so happy she's doing this for you now. And discipline and self-learning, these are actual questions. They say they're studying, catch them video games. How do we discipline them? Nakakatakot sa discipline is you can't, discipline is a bad word for many people. And there are more than 1,000 of you. I don't know what if you want to talk about kids, okay. In psychology, we call it the age of regulation. The discipline would be, we tell the kids very clearly what to do. Sorry, anak, you're only allowed computers for 30 minutes. That's it. Actually, you don't even say sorry. Your kid is 3 years old. You're doing that because you love your kids, so no apologies. Okay? By 8 to 12, ito na. If you limit screen time for your children and they see that you're using it all the time, they will start complaining, Mommy, why are you yung ganito? So you have to be good role models. So imitation na sila. By 13 years, imitation is no longer enough. And this is where majority of the problems lie. In practically all my talks, dito sila nahihirapan. Yung sa mga teenagers. Kasi wala na. Teenagers won't listen, hindi ro ganyan. And teenagers are the most vulnerable people to be addicted, and not just addicted. Teenagers are also the most vulnerable according to these two documentaries. They're the ones, they're the prime things for fake news, mga ganito. It's basically all. Kasi lagi silang online. And they're fed fake news by algorithms. So, paano na yan? It's harder. Your entire being, you would have to, I do a lot of cuento to my classes about my best students before, Rosel Ambubuyog, Lionel Tangangco, Haya Bendania. I talk to them and I give the names because I want the students to feel that these are students who were also students before and who managed to do well despite all the distractions of the world. That's one. I want to inspire them. You have to hit their feelings. Parents, you have to do the same. Okay? And you also have to communicate with your kids. Kung away kayo ng away, walang mangyayari. And banning devices, I'm sorry, does not work. Every time you ban something, it makes it more attractive. So they have to regulate themselves. You cannot always be the police for them. This is already when they're older. You be the police when they're younger. And you start them on the study habits and the structure. Afterwards, they can do it more. We did, again, another survey of 600 top Ateneo students. They have, this is the result. So what do they do and how do they study and what makes them succeed? So it's all here with all their names. And if you want more learning strategies, they're all in Anvil. I will end a bit now with some strategies. So these are just examples of my students to study online and offline. Again, we want to make most use of online learning. So I tell them they do SMART goals. You know that, specific, measurable, etc. Google-based, you know this. Begin with subjects you're difficulty with, focus on what you don't know. And I tell them not to do multitasking. Multitasking is a scary thing. So if I tell them if you have 10 to 20 windows open, including during online class, there is no way you're going to really focus. Impossible. Okay? So one would be, because they're saying, oh, Mom, we can switch from this to the other. We can do math and English and Filipino and philosophy at the same time. I said, really? Seriously? So multitasking does not work. Dr. Toyang, I think, might tell you more about that one. Study after study shows single tasking is still better. Sequential tasking is still better. So multitask, we're not machines. We cannot do two complex tasks at the same time. Okay, we can only do multitasking, quote unquote, with easy tasks. Like I can walk and talk, ayan. I can listen while running, ayan. Because I don't have to consciously think about one task. But if I have to think about 2 or 3 tasks, like right now, I cannot say that I'm giving a talk to you and I also have to think about other things. I can't. My brain is now thinking of what to tell you in the time that I have. So, yung multitasking, myth din yan. Anvil allowed me to share this. There's been a huge clamor for parents and schools and students on how to be independent. I think the biggest problem right now is that our kids are not independent enough. So we have to police them. Because if we trust that they can police themselves, we don't have to do it for them. Okay? If we trust that they can stop after 2 hours, they're okay, diba? So it's more of autonomy and independence. How do we raise independence? So this is actually a book that I just came out with, and the book launch, and it's free. I insisted that it will be free. Will be streamed on their Unveil Facebook page on November 21, 2 p.m. You're not required to buy the book, but I'll be giving a parenting talk and a teacher's talk, slightly different from this one, on that day. So the last time I did this for them, they did a Zoom room, but the Zoom room was not big enough. So ngayon, we don't want Zoom na. We say just do na lang streaming so that anyone who needs it can attend. So this is just November 21. I will end with telling my students and the parents, given the pandemic now, what are the mindset that we should have? First one, gratitude. So imagine, look at this. Many of you who are listening to me now, don't you even feel how miraculous this is? You know, many of you are in Visayas, in Mindanao. You know, Bicol was just devastated by the storm, and yet some of you are from Bicol, and you're online and you're listening now. So that's a miracle. So it's a miracle we have the luxury of doing this now, the webinar. So that is a blessing. I tell my students that instead of complaining everything about how difficult online learning is, how bad their Wi-Fi is, I said, mabuti may Wi-Fi kayo. Kasi maraming estudyante walang Wi-Fi. So that's one. Parents, gratitude. Somehow we have lost. Our young people, gratitude, wala na masyado. My older students, they say thank you a lot. The younger students, wala masyado. Medyo ang tawag ko, entitlement mentality. And this hits whatever social class. It's not just for the wealthy. Even the lower social classes, wala na rin masyadong gratitude. So parents, make the most of what you have. Instead of counting our burdens, let's count our blessings. And especially for mental health. Okay? I tell my students, you can always have the medications, which is essential. You can undergo therapy, which is also essential. But in the end, our worst cases, yung talagang suicidal na, ilang attempts na, medication na, CBT, ang dami ng therapy. In the end, I've seen, and I wish that there will be more research that comes out on this one. In the end, the only thing that will momentarily distract them from the self-focus, the self-pity, the self-obsession would be reaching out to others, even if they don't feel like doing it. I'll end with Father Nebres. Father Ben Nebres was the former president of Ateneo and my mentor. And even Father Nebres, he's now 80 years old, I've asked his help in certain students with mental health problems. And there was one who was particularly, as in 7 years na siya, talagang more than 10 attempts. And in the end, sabi ko kay Father, pagod na ako. We don't know, it's just like five medical city psychiatrists in Pedia. In the end, Father Ben told her, when she went for him again to complain about, she wanted to end her life, etc. Ang ginawa ni Father Ben, sabi niya, okay, let's not, no more talking. Come with me today and we will visit Gawad Kalinga. And she did. And he made her help. And she didn't really like it, but that's what she kept on doing. And I'm happy to tell you, she's alive today so much better. In the end, all of this social media, takot tayo sa internet kasi nga it's so insidiously focusing on the self. Social media is sobrang me, my likes, my face, my followers. This is not healthy for us. Human beings are supposed to be helping other people. We're supposed to go beyond the self. So all this obsession on me, is wreaking havoc with learning. It's wreaking havoc with mental health. It's wreaking havoc with everything, talagang. So let us, in this pandemic, I tell my students, the moment you feel sorry for yourselves, just call me. I will tell you cuento about other people who are so inspiring, who are worse off, and yet who are happier, yet who are more content. And parents, please, this time, pandemic, I know nag-aaral sila, I know takot tayo. If you're going to expose them to social media, I wish you don't. I wish you can just not do it, no social media at all. If you can, that's what many people say. Then Expose them to what's positive. Monitor their feeds. Look at what their Facebook, what comes out on their Facebook, what comes out on your Facebook, iba siya. Okay? So algorithms give you what you want to see. So that's why it's so scaly now, the world. Uh, in the end, so thank you, stay well, and God bless. Thank you so much, and I wish everyone the best. Again, thank you for inviting me here, Dr. Lara. Thank you, Dr. Trina and Dr. Toya. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Twina. As usual, it is such a joy to hear you speak. So I do look forward to the November 21 launch of your book. And I think I speak for everyone when I say that the tips that you've provided us today will not only be helpful for parents with children, but they will also be helpful for everyone listening. So please continue to inspire more people with your talks and your lectures. We look forward to them very much.
Thank you.
So, to go on with our next speaker, so, our next speaker is a clinical associate professor at the UP College of Medicine. She's also a developmental and behavioral pediatrician of UP Philippine General Hospital, Cardinal Santos Medical Center, and Manila Med Child Development and Enrichment Center. A certified positive discipline parent educator and the founder of DevPeds Village, a website on parenting and child development, and DevPed Titas, a Filipino YouTube channel on parenting and child development. So, to discuss digital pandemic, recognizing threats of screen time on children's health in the time of pandemic, let's all give a warm welcome to Dr. Victoria Nolasco. Hi, Mom Toyang!
Thank you so much, Doc Lara, for that very kind introduction. And thank you very much also to Ma'am Quina for such an excellent, excellent lecture. She was really one of our favorite professors in college. And we always learn a lot and we look forward to each and every class. And it's really an honor to be speaking along with her in this webinar. So today I'll be talking about digital pandemic, recognizing threats of screen time on children's health. So today in this webinar, I'm going to talk about first the effect of recreational screen use on physical, developmental, and psychosocial well-being of children. And we'll talk about recommendations on appropriate screen use. So Ma'am Quina already talked about many of these tips and recommendations, and many of them would be applicable to, let's say, school-age children and older kids. So I'm going to focus more on younger kids and strategies also for healthy media use. So I can't count the number of times that a mom will say that, I feel so guilty because my baby is so young and already addicted to the iPad, already addicted to screens, already addicted to watching videos. And, the point of this webinar is I'm going to tell you that it's not your fault because there are so many things that when we talk about this, a lot of things are stacked up against parents. If we're going to try to limit the gadget use of our child, it's really an uphill battle. So in this webinar, I want to talk about all these things that can make it harder for us to control screen time and what we can do about it. And that's why my emphasis here is there's no parent shaming, there's no judging. If your child is using more than the amount recommended, then we're here to help and support you and not to judge and criticize you. And we have absolute respect and empathy for all of you who are struggling with parenting during this pandemic. So what are the reasons that they usually give why they're using digital media during the pandemic? So there's teaching, there's learning and entertainment. And that's one of the ways that parents can work or rest. So they're working at home, there's nobody else to take care of their kids. So they can give their child a screen so they can work. But take note that this is only one of the ways that parents and loved ones, like for example, for kids who feel isolated from their friends, then this is one of the ways that they can connect. And exposure to the world outside the home. And some say that, my kids learn from these skills specific to the video, the video or the game. Like, for example, oh, they learn teamwork, they learn strategy. But as we're going to talk about, there are actually better ways to learn this offline. And these, you can do them, but they must be done in moderation. And of course, with the precautions that Dr. Aquina talked about earlier. And also on Thursday, there's going to be a webinar of Ako Para sa Bata about safe internet use. So make sure to watch that webinar and you also take those precautions into account. So this is based on research that excessive screen time is one of the top 3 stressors for parents during the pandemic. And they also noted an increase in the amount of screen time that they're giving during the pandemic. Actually, in this study, only a minority of kids were using the screens for more than 6 hours. This is for young kids, less than 5 years old. However, another survey pre-pandemic already showed that young kids can go up to 7 hours a day on the screens. So what can we do about it? And as Dr. Aquina also said, sometimes we think, it's a really matter of willpower, but I'm going to talk about the effect on the brain. And that's why it's very difficult to rely only on willpower to control screen time. So increasingly also, there are online games that include gambling-like elements like loot boxes, microtransactions. This is from the World Health Organization. And marketing of video games increased during the pandemic. And many games have gambling-like elements, and this is really quite dangerous. So what are the effects of excessive screen use? So I often hear this question from parents. Is screen time really a big deal? I'll just give a few minutes here. I'll give 30 minutes here. So I'll talk about the effects of screen time on the entire body. So first of all, one of its biggest effects is really on brain development. So screen time, if excessive, it's associated with actual physical brain damage to both gray matter and white matter. So gray matter, that would be our brain cells. The white matter, those would be the connections between our brain cells. So this isn't just something that is psychological. It's not just something that, people made up. They see actual physical changes when they do MRI studies, when they do functional MRI studies. So they see a change in how the brain is built, and they see a change in how the brain works. So that is one of the reasons why we have what we call an internet addiction disorder and internet gaming disorder. So this one is still being debated whether or not they're going to include it in DSM-5. But honestly, there are really so many cases already. Doctors, pediatricians, psychologists are seeing more and more of this. And even kids as young as 4 are already being hospitalized due to internet addiction disorders because they're no longer eating, they're no longer interested in any other online activities. So this is the repetitive use of video games over the internet with an impairment in lifestyle functioning. And you meet this disorder if you meet 5 of the 9 criteria in the past 12 months. So if you're preoccupied with internet gaming, if you have withdrawal symptoms, like you feel sad or anxious or irritable, like every time the gaming stops, like for example, we have some patients that the parents have to have 3 internet connections at home because the moment the Wi-Fi stops, the child really becomes irritable and throws a tantrum. And if there's tolerance, like before you would be happy with 30 minutes of play, then you need to have more and more play for this to happen. And if there are failed attempts to stop or reduce the time spent playing, like the child has tried to control it, the parents have tried to control it, but it has failed. And this one also happens in adults. There are also many adults with internet gaming disorder. And loss of interest in non-video game activities or hobbies. Sometimes we hear this from parents. I try to interest my child in other activities, but no, it's really only the screen that will keep him happy. And if there's continued use already despite problems and negative consequences, and they lie to others about time spent playing, they use gaming as a way to escape negative moods. And if they've already endangered or lost a job or a relationship as a result of play. So what actually happens in our brains that will predispose us to internet gaming disorder? Okay, so they notice that in patients with internet gaming disorder, they will lose brain cells in these parts of their brains. So one is, you call it the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. So this is a scary sounding technical term, but this is actually the part of the brain that is necessary for what you call executive function. So what's executive function? That's the ability to think, to plan, to make decisions. That's the ability to have self-control. So that one, you lose brain cells in that part of the body. So think of it. All these games and videos, they're already so addictive. So you need more self-control to stop them, but you're losing brain cells in that part of the brain that is responsible for self-control. So it becomes a vicious cycle. And you also lose brain cells in what you call the cingulate cortex. And this is the part of the brain that is responsible for empathy and emotions, for knowing about the feelings of others, for taking on the perspective of somebody else. And the supplementary motor area, which is for control of movement, which is why we are getting so many patients nowadays who are really quite uncoordinated. So both, it's a lack of exercise because they spend so much time on the screens, and at the same time, the time spent on the screen also makes this part of the brain shrink. And then there's always the question, which one is first? So is it because they have more screen use? That's why these brain changes are happening? Or maybe, their brains are already like that, and that's why they're more prone to using the screen. That's why this study is so interesting compared with other studies, because this one measured the changes in the brain depending on how long they have had this internet addiction disorder. And they found that those who have had it for fewer months, let's say 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, the longer you have that disorder, the more the loss of the brain cells. So that means that the disorder is really correlated with the loss of the brain cells. They didn't already have this loss at the start, but the more that this goes on, the more brain cells are being lost. And why are games so addictive? Because when you play a game, or it's not just playing a game, it's even social media. If you see a social media like, if you see that somebody liked your post, it causes a release of dopamine. Now, dopamine is a chemical that signals reward for the brain. In fact, they did experiments before on, let's say, pigeons. If they push a lever and that lever will cause an injection of dopamine in the brain, they will really go crazy. They will keep on pushing and pushing and pushing that lever. So that's what happens in drug addiction. In drug addicts, like when you take opium or whatever illegal drugs, that drug causes an increase of dopamine in the brain. And they found out that when you have internet at this level in the game, when you complete a mission in the game, or when you get a like on social media, it's also going to cause that same increase in dopamine. But take note, what else causes an increase in dopamine? Dopamine is not really all that bad, because in real life, you get dopamine, for example, when you get a hug, when somebody tells you good job. But the thing is, these screens, these games, they're so compelling, just like the drugs, that the rise in dopamine is so high and so intense that sometimes it can overshadow all those other causes of dopamine. So what can we do? We really have to break that cycle somewhere. And then I often hear this, but my child isn't addicted, so that's okay, it's no big deal. Okay, so let's look at this study. This study is in young children. These are 3 to 5-year-old children, and these are not children who have internet addiction disorder. If they are found to have internet addiction disorder, they were excluded from the study. So this is your usual 3 to 5-year-old. They found out that the more that these kids use the screen, they have what you call lower microstructural organization. Now, this sounds scary. This sounds like a really technical term. But what does this mean? Microstructure. These are the building blocks of your brain cells and the building blocks of the connections of your brain. So if it's like a house, think of it as like the hollow blocks in your house. So this one, the foundations of their brain don't look as good, aren't normal compared with those who have less screen time. And it also impairs what you call the myelination. What is the myelination? That's the myelin sheath. That's the covering of the nerves of your brain. Now, why is this so important? This is so important for faster processing of the brain. So I'm sure maybe some of us here would have dial-up internet connections. So if you think of the brain that is myelinated and unmyelinated, without the myelin sheath, it's like your brain is on a dial-up or on a DSL internet connection, which is quite slow. But once your myelin sheath forms well, then it's like you already have a high-speed fiber connection. It's going to be much faster. And they found that those who have more screen time, they have poorer myelination in the parts of the brain for developing language and for developing literacy skills. So I hear a lot of parents, they say that they ask their kids to watch these videos because, for example, because I'm not such a good English speaker, I want my child to learn English, so I let him watch English videos. Or this is where my child learns to read. Maybe if you do it moderately, it might have some benefit, and you have to choose the videos well. We'll talk more about that later on, how to choose the right videos for your kids. But if you look at these studies, that's not going to support letting your kid use a lot of screen time to be able to learn these language and literacy skills. And also they found out that and these were kids who were watching educational videos. They found that those who were watching more videos, they actually scored lower in tests of language processing and vocabulary and early literacy. So this means that even if the child is not addicted, there is already an effect on the brain. And it's not just on the brain, also on the heart and on the entire body. This is a study of almost 400,000 adults. And they found out that for every 2 hours increase in screen time, there's an increase in heart disease, an increase in the chance of cancer, and an increase in the risk of death. So if there are some here that, maybe you yourselves are using a lot of screen time, or maybe the grandparents are using a lot of screen time, and that's why they're taking care of the kids also get a lot of screen time. I hope this motivates all of us to decrease the screen time in our lives. If not for brain development, at least, to take care of our kids. There's already a fear of increased mortality because of COVID. We don't want to add this risk factor. And they found that this effect is especially great in those with lower scores on fitness measures. So that means those who don't get as much exercise, or those who score lower on tests like their reaction time, their grip strength, they would have a greater effect on this. And also on overall health. There are so many studies about this. It would take too long to enumerate all of them. But screen time has been linked to so many problems, from obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, sleep problems. That's why they don't recommend using screens 2 hours before bedtime, because the blue light interferes with sleep. And digital eye strain and nearsightedness. The ophthalmologists are actually worried about this. They said, after the pandemic, there's going to be a big rise in myopia or nearsightedness. And then also headaches and back pain. And with all of these studies, whether for overall health or with brain development, there's always a criticism, is this study good enough? Is this, but look, there are already studies involving 400,000 people. This is just a small study. Is this really reliable? There are still a lot of objections to these screen time studies. But think of how it was in the 1950s. In the 1950s, people didn't really believe yet that smoking was bad for your health. There were even some who thought that, smoking might even be healthy. And that's when the first studies came out that, smoking causes cancer, smoking causes a lot of disease. I believe that screen time is to our generation what smoking was to our parents or our grandparents' generation. So today, nobody questions that anymore. Studies have proven conclusively that smoking causes cancer and smoking is bad for your health. But it's too late already for those in the 1950s, 1960s, they kept on smoking. They said it's not yet proven. So do you want to wait until nobody is questioning it anymore, and all of our brains have already been affected? The studies are already there. The studies are already quite convincing. So on development and behavior also, they found that excessive screen time is associated with fewer verbal and nonverbal interactions between parents and children. Of course, if the kids are on the screen, if the parents are on the screen, they don't talk to their kids as much. And they found that those who have more screen time have more cognitive delays, social, emotional, and language delays, more conflicts between parents and kids. And those who watch violent content would have more behavior problems. Now, violent content doesn't have to be, the usual violent movies that we think about that are, R-rated or PG-15 with all the shooting and all of the blood. They did a research where they showed kids a video of a person hitting a doll. A person hitting a doll. I mean, this is so common. If you look at videos on YouTube Kids today, I am sure that so many of the videos would have a scene of somebody hitting somebody. And they found that within the next hour, they found that, the kids were more likely to hit their playmates. And they found that the earlier age of media onset, so the earlier that they start the kids on the screen, the greater cumulative hours of media use, and also if they don't screen the content. So they didn't use this term. So they said that those that are not on, let's say, a major network. So this is the difference between screen today and screens. If for those like me who grew up in the 80s, they said, we were watching TV then, we're fine. But it's really different today because before, those were your only choices, those channels. After the kids shows, it was already the news, you got bored, you had no choice. And during that time, there are so many censors and media boards that are reviewing everything that you see on TV. Now it's not the same. Anybody can post a video on YouTube. Anybody can create an app or make a game and also program it to their liking. So all of these are significant predictors of poor executive functioning in preschoolers. And what did we talk about executive functioning again? Executive function, you need this to make decisions. You need this to plan your day. You need this for everyday life. You need this for self-control, to control your tantrums, to control your emotions. When mom tells you that you can't do something and then you stop yourself from doing it, that is executive function. And excessive screen use has an effect on all of those. And also on mental health. So they did a research on more than 40,000 children who were aged 2 to 17, and they found that those with screen time more than an hour a day were less curious and less eager to learn new things, and they're less able to stay calm when challenged, and they're less likely to finish their tasks when started, and they're also more likely to argue too much with their caregivers, and they have a lower psychological well-being. So this is contrary to what a lot of people think that, we need screen time to improve our mental health. So maybe to a certain extent, but especially now, that's how we connect with other people that we know. But if it's excessive, it can result in lower psychological well-being. And they focused only on kids that were 2 to 5 years old. They found that these kids were more easily distracted. They lost their temper more often. They cannot calm down, and they have more difficulty with self-control. So this would include perseverance, sitting still, completing simple tasks, and not being distracted. And they found out that teenagers who had more than 7 hours of screen time per day were more than twice more likely to be diagnosed with depression, anxiety, or to need medication for a psychological or a behavioral disorder. Okay, so if you look at there's actually a dose-response relationship. This is the graph for different ages, and the more screen time they had a day, there were more of these effects. This is just one example graph on arguing too much with the caregiver. So I know sometimes all of these effects can be quite scary and quite discouraging, but what can we do about it? So Dr. Aquina already talked about some of the strategies and many of the recommendations. And these are excellent recommendations. If you have a child at home, make sure to act on Dr. Aquina's recommendations. I'm going to add some more recommendations about kids, especially those who are younger. So these are the recommendations from the World Health Organization. They're also supported by organizations like the American Academy of Pediatrics and the Philippine Pediatric Society, even the Ophthalmology Society. So for 18 months or younger, no screens are still the best. With the exception of live video chat with family and friends. So it's okay during the pandemic, you're not with the grandparents, aunts, uncles, you can do video chat with them, but no screens. At this age, babies cannot learn from the screen. They've already done the studies about this. They showed videos to young kids, and they can tell through functional MRI studies whether the baby retains a memory of that or not. So for those who, let's say, were exposed to a certain foreign language on the screen when they were young, later on, they don't retain a memory of it, unlike when it is an actual person speaking to them. But what can happen? You might get that baby addicted to the screen. Later on, I'm going to show you an example of a video that can be very, very addictive if you show it to a young child. Actually, even to us, maybe. It's going to cause that dopamine release, that shrinkage in gray matter. So all of those effects that I mentioned earlier, but without the learning benefits. So there is no benefit to showing that to kids who are younger than 18 months. Between 18 months to 2 years, you may start introducing some screen time, but avoid solo use. So watch this with your kids and choose high quality educational programming and watch it with your kids. Again, later on, I will show you how to tell whether a program is of high quality educational programming. Then from 2 to 5 years old, limit screen time to 1 hour a day, and you watch as well to make sure that you understand. Okay. Now, during the pandemic, there are some experts who recommend that, you can relax screen time a little bit, especially since the kids have fewer activities, they don't go out as less. Maybe you can, but you have to be careful with doing it. And again, you have to choose the right kind of screen time. And for 6 years old and older, place consistent limits and the time spent on the types of media. Follow the recommendations of Dr. Aquina. So what are certain strategies that we can use on healthy media use? So first of all, one of the problems that we talked about was eye strain and back strain. So you follow the 90-90-90 rule. So this goes for online schooling also. So your elbows, your hips, your knees, and your ankles should be at 90 degrees. Okay, so if you have to put the laptop on top of a book for the laptop to be eye level so that you don't have to stoop over, then you do that. We don't want the child, or you also, if you're working, stooping over. And make sure that you take frequent movement breaks. Then you also follow what you call the 20-20-20 rule for minimizing digital eye strain. So every 20 minutes, look at something 20 feet away for 20 seconds. And also, you have to make sure that the screen is at least 18 to 24 inches away from you, which is why if it's a choice between a tablet and a laptop might be better, especially since the laptop is less portable, so maybe the child is slightly less likely to spend too much time doing it. And if you want to know more about this, go to the Facebook page of the Philippine Association of Pediatric Ophthalmology and Strabismus. They have a lot of recommendations on preventing digital eye strain, and they translated it into different languages: English, Filipino, Bicolano, Bisaya, all of the dialects in the Philippines, and even some foreign languages also. So that's the first strategy. The second strategy is you choose the appropriate times of screen time for your child. Now, this may be surprising to some people, but they found on studies that what they call passive media is you watch high quality shows on television. They're actually better and less addictive than what they call active media like games. By the way, active, I don't mean active like you have a video of somebody exercising, or let's say it's a video of an exercise class and you follow along. That's not the active that I'm talking about. The active means, the child will click on something. And the passive media, where you watch a television show, is less addictive compared to a game. Why? Both will cause a release of dopamine, but the active media will cause a more intense surge in dopamine. It's like the pigeon clicking on the lever. And okay, so how do we choose good quality programs? What is high quality educational programming? So there are already studies that show that well-designed television programs can help kids who are 3 years old and up. And in particular, the show that they did the studies on is actually Sesame Street. Sesame Street is the show that there is actual evidence that it can help kids, but not babies. These are kids who are 3 years and up. Okay. Now, how do we know that something is high quality? Now, just because it's labeled educational, I see so many, I guess because Facebook knows that I'm interested in educational things, it always pops up on my feed. This is educational, this is educational. Buy this for your child will be smarter. Now, listen to this, and I hope you will not fall prey to all of these ads. Just because they're labeled educational, it doesn't mean that it's high quality. Just because it's labeled for kids or just because it's on YouTube Kids doesn't mean it's high quality. What do you need to get on YouTube Kids? Is there a board of censors looking at all these videos before they go on YouTube Kids? No, there are millions and millions of videos there. When somebody complains, it can take some time before that video can get taken down. So just because it's on YouTube Kids does not mean it is high quality. So you have to use videos that are the same pace as everyday life. Avoid the fast animations. Why? Because fast animations will condition the brain to expect this level of stimulation. When they sit down at a classroom and listen to their teacher, or just me here talking on the screen, they're going to have a hard time paying attention because that's not what their brains are used to. So let's get an example. I know there are some who will hate me for using this example because this is a very, very favorite of many kids. Okay, so let's use, okay, let's set a timer for 30 seconds. Okay, let's count how many scene changes in 30 seconds. Okay, let's count. Okay, scene number 1, scene number 2, 30 seconds. Okay. Scene number 3, scene number 4, scene number 5, okay. Scene number 6, 7, okay. 8, 9, 10. Okay? See, we're not even to 30 seconds yet. And we're not even to 30 seconds yet. We already have 12 different scene changes. Now, where does this happen in real life? Have you ever had in a real bus ride where 1 minute you're inside, then you're outside, then in front, and you're beside? So when kids are watching this all of the time, that is what their brains will get used to. And it's sad. I see so many moms that say, I'm a failure as a mom because, I started out letting my kids watch a few minutes. I thought it was no harm. And now my child is addicted. It's not because you were a bad mom or because you have no self-control. It's because that video was designed that way. Why? Ma'am Quina already talked about the Netflix documentaries, but I just want to talk a little bit about my own experience since I also started a YouTube channel. So I started learning a bit about how YouTube works, and they have this thing called the algorithm. Ma'am Quina also mentioned about the algorithm. So what's the algorithm? The algorithm is actually a program. It's not a bad person. It's not somebody out to make your kids addicted. That's not it. I'm not saying that, they're actually, well, there are some who are saying that they're deliberately doing this. But even if they're not deliberately doing this, what is this algorithm? It's a program that is designed to keep people watching on YouTube longer. Why? Because the longer they're on YouTube, the more YouTube makes money. So what happens? If they notice that, if they show this video, this person stays on YouTube longer, what will they do? They will keep on showing more and more of those kinds of videos, more and more videos from that channel. So what happens? If you're a YouTube channel, you want to make your videos as addictive as possible. Why? Because that will place you higher on the algorithm And YouTube will be more likely to show your video to the public on the suggested videos. Isn't it? You open YouTube Kids, you open YouTube. A lot of those suggested videos are going to show up. So the more addictive that your video is, the more likely that your video is going to be there. This also happened. This also happened to me. Like I prepared a playlist. I downloaded it. So I thought that YouTube was going to play only the videos in my playlist. But no, one of these videos stuck in. And that was my child's first time to watch the video. And when I tried to take away the screen, he threw a tantrum and he screamed, even if it was the first time. So if this happens to you and you're a mom, I don't blame you. It's not because you're a bad parent, but that's how the algorithm works. It's like we're being set up to fail in limiting screen time. So what should we do? I suggest if you have a young child, then you make your playlist, you download it already. There's the app option to download it on the app. Then turn off the internet so that the only videos that will be shown are the ones that you approve, and they don't show those videos with fast scene changes that are more addictive. Okay, so what's an example? This is one of my child's favorite videos. So
I'd like
this
to ask
one,
you a very
if
special
you
Christmas
see,
favor. You see, the
this is just a person. This is just a person speaking and singing. Later on, he's going to sing. So now, if your child is used to fast-paced animation, he's going to protest. She might find this boring, but they have to get used to this pace. Otherwise, they will have a hard time with school and in real life. And this is a bit of an old video, but there are many new videos also that are quite good. Like, for example, Sesame Street also has a YouTube channel. In the YouTube channel of Sesame Street, it's usually just one character, at least the ones I watch, just one character talking on the screen. Or there are many teachers who also have their own YouTube channels where they get a book and they read it, or they sing a song, or they have circle time. So if you're going to show your kids videos, it's better to use those videos. Or even, this isn't in YouTube Kids anymore, but sometimes I let my toddler watch videos of National Geographic, like the animal shows, even travel shows, even sometimes shows of people going around and eating different foods. Just make sure that there are no curse words or anything like that if it's not a video that's made for kids. But they might actually be better than those videos that are labeled educational and those that are labeled for kids. And these are other good ways to use screen time. So do video chat with your friends and loved ones, and make sure you know who your child is chatting with. And use videos of actual people reading or singing stories. There are many videos like this on YouTube. Or use your own videos or photos. And use exercise and activity videos. Or music playlists or podcasts or audiobooks. Like if you like, let's say Cocomelon, you don't have to show the YouTube video, but just use their songs on Spotify. And also, you can read ebooks. However, physical books still provide a better sensory experience because they can actually feel the pages and they can cause less eye strain also. And also, this will be discussed more in next week's webinar. Know who your child is interacting with online, know what your child is doing, and it may help to learn your child's favorite game. And avoid having the TV on in the background when no one is watching. Studies have shown that there are 500 to 1,000 fewer adult words spoken for every hour that the television is on in the background. And why would this affect our kids? Because the fewer words that we speak with our kids, the lower their vocabulary becomes, and the fewer conversational turns that we have with our kids. And conversation is very, very important, especially in this time of the pandemic. And add offline activities as much as possible. They don't have to be complicated. Sometimes parents get discouraged because they spend so much time preparing for an activity. I think also sometimes it's social media that is responsible for this, because if we look at Pinterest or Instagram or Facebook, all these kids' activities are so complicated. You have to get a lot of ingredients, flour, paint, food coloring, and you have to get these materials. And then sometimes moms will tell me, I'm so tired, I have to stay up at night just to prepare for the next day's activity. But that's because that's what social media told us. You don't have to do that. They don't have to be complicated. If you have a young child or if you have a toddler, go to our website, devpedsvillage.com. I have a free mini ebook there, 45 stress-free toddler activities. It's a free download. These are simple activities that you can do without preparation. And these are all offline activities. And these skills learned, they say you learn coordination, you learn teamwork, you learn all of these things from screen time. They're better learned offline. And also, allow your child to get some downtime. It's okay to get bored. We shouldn't overschedule their lives. Sometimes parents get stressed, like, I have to entertain my child. I have to give activities to my child. But we don't have to do that. Sometimes before the pandemic, they were overscheduled. They had a toddler class. Maybe they had lessons also for older kids. They had soccer lessons, swimming lessons, basketball lessons, common, enrichment, all of these things. And then suddenly during the pandemic, when these classes were canceled, they're now at a loss. So use this time. Instead of trying to fill that time, use this time for a reset, for a rest, for a breather. It's okay for them to get bored. It's when they're bored, that's when their creativity will come out. That's when their personalities will come out, and that they will actually learn more from this than from us dictating and scheduling every minute of their lives. And more screen time is not the answer to depression and quarantine fatigue. So, what can help with depression, with quarantine fatigue? What can help to build resilience? That's what we want in this age. We want to build resilience in our kids, especially since there is this stress of the pandemic, what we call serve and return interaction. So what is serve and return interaction? It's like a tennis match. The child gives a serve. How? By looking at the parent, by trying to catch our attention, by smiling at us. Then we give the return. We look at them, we smile back at them. If they're pointing to something, we look at what they're pointing at. And if you keep on doing this, that will help their mental health, their emotional regulation. And this one, they saw this in several studies in Harvard University. This is the single most important thing in building resilience in our children. So go to the Center for Developing Child in Harvard University. They have excellent videos about building resilience and doing serve and return. And finally, it's going to be very hard to limit screen time and do all of these if we're also tired ourselves. So make sure you practice self-care. Turn off social media and have more time for sleep, for rest, for exercise, and get also your whole family on board. As we said, this is for the health of the whole family. This will also decrease the risk of cancer and heart disease. So you can share tools with other caregivers of your children so that it's going to be easier for them to manage screen time. So give them specific and easy activities that they can do instead of screen time, because it's very hard to just say, oh, don't let them use screen time. But what are they going to do instead? So you can head over to devpedsvillage.com and download that guide if you have a toddler. You can use a timer. Like for me personally, I use a sand timer. So when the timer runs out, I just let my child finish that particular video that he's watching and then turn it off already. And you use your pre-approved playlist, turn off the internet in whatever device your child is using. And you can also do a home setup for screen-free play and activities. So in this webinar, we talked about the effect of screen time on all aspects of our health and in kids' development, and how to choose more appropriate forms of screen time, and how we can maximize the benefits while minimizing the harmful effects. So I hope we all do this today, especially as parents. Schedule and do one screen-free activity you can do with your child. Just choose one. It can be very overwhelming to think of all of the activities and to all of this. So just do one screen-free activity for 10 minutes. Then you can add as you go along. So thank you. And I hope that this talk has been very helpful. Studies, many of them are review studies. So that means that there are many studies already. They combine these studies together into one study. So there's a lot of reliability already in these researches. So thank you.
All right. So you just heard from Ma'am Doyang. Ma'am Doyang, thank you very much for that very insightful and eye-opening lecture. I'm sure a lot of us learned about the detrimental effects of excessive screen time, but I'm sure a lot of us were also encouraged to get on a better track towards using our screens more effectively, not only for our children, but for ourselves as well. So thank you again, Ma'am Doyan. So November is National Children's Month, and to celebrate Buwan ng Bata, we have invited youth representatives to share their insights and reactions to the presentations. Expect youth reactors and youth participation for the whole month of November. Today, we are joined by Nina. So Nina is currently on her fourth year of BS Molecular Biology and Biotechnology. She is a member of UP Pugad Psych and former treasurer of the UP Molecular Biology and Biotechnology Society. To share her insights and reaction on the two presentations, I'm giving the Zoom space to our youth reactor, Silviana G. Manalo. So welcome, Nina.
Hello. First off, thank you, Dr. Quina and Dr. Toyang, for that very insightful talk. So I guess like one of the things I realized is like the experiences of kids now seem to be different from my own, in such a way that like now there's like the fact that kids have more access to iPads, it really calls for a different way of like having to regulate these things. And for me personally, I remember like being more playing more with like toys rather than like watching TV because I was more into that. But I guess the times have changed, obviously, as we know. But even up to now, like what I realize that I experience is um the dangers of social media. So like even if I'm already mature, I understand that feeling of like instant gratification. Like subconsciously I feel like I get impatient about things, but I'm able to control that. And even before, I used to joke about like Facebook hearing me, because like when I talk about something, I'd see it pop up on my I'd see like an ad pop up on Facebook, and I'd be like, oh, I just talked about that. But obviously like this is really true, this really happens. um Another issue, I guess, like at least I don't know if it happens to like other like people, but for me right now, a big issue I have with like social media is that apart from being a space to like connect with people, or yeah, to connect with people, it also becomes like a space for doing group work. I guess like a lot of people my age suffer the same issue, um because it makes it extra difficult because it makes me more accustomed to multitasking. Like I feel um like I'm doing group work with my friends, not group work with like some schoolmates, but then at the same time I'm like looking at the picture of something because it's all on Facebook. There's just this one platform where you can do so many things. So I like the recommendations that Dr. Queen and Dr. Toyang really like laid out. One thing that struck me was the whole online offline balance, because what I try to do right now, especially even with classes being online, after class when I'd have to like read maybe like a journal for like an experiment or something, I'd be reading it online, and I do realize that I do get prone to just scanning instead of reading, and it becomes really inefficient because like I'd have to go back to the paper and then I'd have to read it again, and then I realized there were things I really missed. So like trying out the whole offline, printing these journals offline might help. It was just the one thing that was hindering me was, I was trying to go paperless, but obviously it's becoming very inefficient, and it becomes tiresome because everything's online now and like all the work is online. And then also what Dr. Toyang said about the whole 20-20-20 rule, like I realized that I also have to try doing this because I get distracted or my eyes get dry and everything. So it's there's a lot to I guess relearn, or a lot of recommendations that I have to try integrating into like the way I handle online classes and everything. I'd also like to uh, like I really liked what Dr. Toying said about like the fact that the science is there. I'm an MBB, so like we really it's science heavy, and there like these things should be taken seriously. And the whole analogy about um how she said that the smoking issues in the 1950s, they're just like similar to the skepticisms of screen time issues now. So these are things that we really have to be taking seriously, because we don't know. I mean, there are already studies that show its implications, and we really have to take these things seriously, even despite all the skepticism around it. And yeah, lastly, the whole issue on mental health. So in both talks, they both pointed out how mental health is very like important, and how like internet use really affects this. And like even I understand, because honestly I get prone to binge watching on Netflix, and like scrolling hours and hours on like Facebook and Instagram. And like after doing those things, I realized na, it's like I'm just like, oh, what did I just do? Like there's just this feeling of emptiness after. And like in the moment it might be like so gratifying. That's the whole idea on like instant gratification. But like after, there's like this feeling of emptiness and then the lack of connection. So I guess that the whole point is like to regulate these things and to limit these things, and to actually, instead of like just binging on Netflix and being on Instagram, um really have to like talk to people and interact with people, because I mean humans are social beings in the first place. And like even I'd see it even in my friends, like my friends would do like social media detoxes. So like obviously like even like people in my generation, we're all aware na social media is toxic and it's overwhelming. So yeah, that's all.
All right. Thanks, Nina, for that reaction. It's always good for all of us health professionals to hear from the people who we're advocating for. So I'm glad to know that what we've talked about today is very useful for you, and that you've the insights you've also shared can also help us change our perspective to think more about what might be helpful for you and what you also may need to hear from us. So let's move on. So I will read the questions and options so everyone can participate. Is everyone ready? I hope you were paying attention to Dr. Queena's lecture. So our first question is, what is the color of Dr. Lee Chua's blouse? Again, what is the color of Dr. Lee Chua's blouse? Is it red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, white, or black? Again, I'll read out the choices. Is it red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, white, or black? So let's see. Let's see how many people will get this right. Okay, so let's see. We we already collated your responses, and 36% answered red, while 32% answered violet. Uh, let's see. I I'm not sure if I saw the color of the blouse of Dr. Queena correctly a while ago, but I think the answer is not among the choices, because to me the color of her blouse looked pink. Anyway, let's move on to our next question. So, according to Dr. Victoria Nolasco, which is ideal to watch for children? videos that are fast-paced, or videos that are slow-paced or the same pace as real life? Again, according to Dr. Victoria Nolasco, which is ideal to watch for children? Videos that are fast-paced or slow-paced and the same pace as life, as real life. So, those are your two choices. Fast-paced videos or with scene changes every few seconds, or slow-paced videos or videos that have the same pace as real life. So again, fast-paced videos or videos that are slow-paced. So I'm glad that majority of the people got the answer correctly because 93% answered that the videos that are slow-paced and have the same pace as real life are recommended or ideal for children to watch. Next webinar. Again, our next question is, what is the topic of the next webinar? So, the choices for our next webinar are online safety of children, positive parenting, supporting parents as teachers, and child online activities. Again, the choices are online safety of children, positive parenting, supporting parents as teachers, and child online activities. So we have a good lineup of topics for the next couple of webinars, but what will be discussed on Thursday's webinar? So let's see. I'm glad that 57% were paying attention and got the answer correctly. So for Thursday, we will be discussing online safety of children. So please stay tuned. I hope that everybody comes back to pay attention not only to our webinar on Thursday, but to the other webinars that we have coming up. So thank you everyone for participating. I think now it's time for us to go to the open forum. So if we can ask Ma'am Toyang to join me for the open forum. Let's get
Yes.
started with our first question. So our first question comes from Reggie Salonga, and his question is, or his or her question is, what can we do to lessen the negative effect to children from using internet when the schedule of the class lasts for 3 hours?
Yes, that's true. That's really a challenge. Actually, it depends on the child's age. Most of these would be school-age children. So for a school-age child, well, what we're afraid of is internet use that is addictive. I don't think that the child will actually be addicted to the online class. You know, it's just like before when we used to spend time, let's say, on our computer typing our report. I mean, we don't get addicted to Microsoft Word. So I don't think anybody's going to get addicted to Zoom. So we just want to protect them. So protect the eye health, minimize eye strain, minimize back strain, 90-90-90 and 20-20-20. And as much as we can make as many offline activities as possible. So their work is already online. So as much as possible, if the leisure can be offline. That's the same for the parents also who are working from home. So if you already work on Zoom for several hours a day, then have also rest and leisure time that is offline. I understand that many of these kids actually have a lot of after class activities through Zoom also, like group projects. So those are necessities, that's beyond our control. So we just do that and do offline activities as much as possible. Now, how about for younger kids? For younger kids, online classes actually aren't suitable for them. I get many reports from parents like they get frustrated. They enroll their kids in online classes and then they say, my child just takes a look at the screen and then runs off. Does my child have ADHD? No, your child doesn't have ADHD. Or Let's say, my child doesn't participate in the screen activity. Like the teacher is talking to her and she doesn't know. That's because young children really have a hard time with online classes, because what happens in an online class, many of the cues that many, in kids thrive on social cues like eye contact, the movement of the whole body, the body language, the nonverbal gestures. A lot of them would get lost in an online class. So if it's already hard for us to concentrate on a Zoom meeting, like I'm sure if you attended Ako Para sa Bata in MOA before, you compare, it's really a different experience. There are advantages, but it really is harder to pay attention online. So think of how much more difficult it will be for our younger kids. So as much as possible, I discourage online classes for younger kids. Maybe you can have shorter classes, like if they exercise together or video chats, all of these things might be okay. But these 3-hour classes should not be for younger kids. And for older kids who have these 3-hour classes, add as many offline activities as possible.
Thanks, Ma'am Toyang. So I hope everyone was listening when we said, please try to add more offline activities for your children as possible so that we can achieve that balance between online and offline. So our next question comes from Alvin Brioso, and the question reads, does this mean that excessive screen time as observed in the children's brain development no longer applies to adults whose brains are fully developed? So, interesting question.
Yes, that's actually very interesting. For one thing, they found that the brain doesn't fully develop until 25 years old. So your prefrontal cortex is still forming. So that's why they complain sometimes that teenagers can be impulsive, or maybe even people in their early 20s. Sometimes the parents will say, they're still quite impulsive. That's because the prefrontal cortex is still forming. Sometimes not as much, sometimes until the 30s. And in fact, I even read some later studies that in certain people, it doesn't even develop until they're much older, like in their 30s or in their 40s. And what is one of the parts of the brain that gets affected? It's the prefrontal cortex. So that means just because, you're not a young child, it doesn't mean that your brain cells aren't forming. So your brain cells are still forming, and the excessive screen use can still affect you. Now, how about for those who are, older, like maybe in their 50s? Well, that can affect brain structure, but it also affects brain function. So, for example, dopamine, it can affect how your brain releases dopamine. So just think of it this way. Screen time is like a drug. So can adults get addicted? Like, for example, you start using drugs when you are in your 40s. Can you still get addicted? Yes. So if you can still get addicted to drugs, you can still get addicted to screen time. But the risk is greatest for the youngest kids.
Okay, so everyone who's listening, so the advice that was shared today not only applies to the children that we all take care of, but also to us. So everyone, please be mindful of the screen time that you are all exposed to. So I think we have time for one last question. And our last question comes from Israel Mark Hermoso. So tanong ni Sir Israel, paano po yung mga bata na maliit pa lang, addict na sa computer games hanggang makagraduate? Paano po matitigil yung addiction nila?
Yun, mahirap talaga yun. That's really difficult. There are people who have actually had to be hospitalized for it. Okay. Well, I think that's the first step. You have to recognize that it's difficult. Because sometimes they will just say, stop. And then hindi sila huminto. And then we get discouraged. We say, ay, wala na, di na yan titigil kasi pinahinto ko. But we said, it's really the dopamine pathways in your brain. So when you stop, the brain craves for that dopamine pathway. So doon niya yun hahanapin. Okay? So it's not just a matter of willpower. So it has to be a very systematic program. It has to be very similar to somebody stopping from alcohol or somebody stopping from drugs. Diba? If you have an alcoholic, how do you stop drinking? First of all, you have to replace with as many non-alcohol problems as possible. Diba? If you're an alcoholic, you want to recover, what do? Hindi ka pupunta sa bar, diba? So, in fact, ang advocate nila dito is complete screen fast. Ay, that's my toddler. Medyo nag-overtime tayo eh. Anyway, yun. So, there's going to be a screen fast. Diba? Pag hindi ka alcoholic, pwede mong sabihin na, oh, drink in moderation. After one drink, you stop. Pero pag alcoholic ka, iba na yung rule eh. Diba? Kasi alam nila, hindi nila kaya mag-stop after one drink. So that's the same for somebody na addicted to games na. Hindi mo pwede sabihin na isang oras lang tapos hinto. Kasi hindi yun kaya. Andyan na yung dopamine, tumaas na. So kailangan complete screen fast. And then, kailangan kung pwedeng i-off yung wifi sa bahay. So mahirap talaga siya for the whole family. It's a whole program. There are professionals who deal with this, mga psychologists, mga psychiatrists. So it's the same process that you use to help an addict. But right now, I think the easiest way to do is to add as many offline activities as possible. Sa start, may inis siya, sasabihin niya corny to compared sa game ko. But, pagtsagaan lang. And then, you brainstorm together with the child, brainstorm together with the teenager. Make a list of offline activities that the person is going to enjoy.
Okay, so it may be difficult, but the most important step is to recognize that there is a issue, and with hard work and determination, the person's addiction can still be a fight that we can win. So, pagtsatsagaan lang talaga natin. So, Ma'am Doyang, any final advice for our parents and guardians who are tuned in right now?
I want to thank everybody for attending. The fact that you're attending this webinar, it's already a big step. It means that you're really concerned about your child's screen time. So just by doing this, it's already a big win, just recognizing it. I remember every time I talk about screen time, I always get many parents who say that, I didn't even know about these videos. I thought that watching these videos is actually good for my child. I thought that playing these educational games is actually good for my child. So just this realization alone and us being more conscious, it can already help. So thank you.
Thank you, Ma'am Doyang. And I know Ma'am Queen is not here, but thank you also to Dr. Queena for sharing her expertise with us this morning. So to wrap up, just a few points that we want to emphasize. So from Dr. Queena, she made a mention a while ago that we have to make motivation a habit, that though we can't avoid distractions, we can manage them, and that when we're doing complex study, print is always better than reading stuff online. And lastly, she said that we have to create a balance between online and offline. So it's all a matter of keeping things in perspective. From Ma'am Toyang, we heard the effects of screen time on a child's development. We also heard tips on how to choose more appropriate forms of media for our child's screen time. And she also gave us practical tips on maximizing the benefits of screen time while minimizing their harmful effects. So thank you very much again to Ma'am Toyang and Dr. Queena for sharing their expertise with us this morning. And thank you very much for everyone for participating. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.
Nasa lansangan ang kwento na